Hello, this is Karen Johnson with another in the series of Proctor's historical videos. The date today is October 7th, 2016, and we're very pleased to have with us two guests who have been very formative in creating the shops at Proctor's, the arcade shops, and they're pretty skinny built shops mostly, but we've really turned them into a big asset. So maybe you would introduce yourself a little bit, Karen Zakrisky and Pat Hurley, and tell us how long and when you did your thing on the shops.
Okay, well, I'm Karen Zakrisky, and I started with the Gift Center back in 1984, and have been there, or was there for 25 years, a quarter of a century. So it started in '82, and I didn't come on board for a couple years later, and it was the creative germ of Day Gillespie. And I must say she recruited me, and I started as a volunteer the first year and went on to manage the second year I was there. And she was able to secure a $5,000 loan from the theater to get the gift center off the ground. And the location was, do you remember the location?
I'm not sure.
We were down sandwiched between the two sets of doorways coming into the arcade.
In a room?
And it was the old Louise Boyka studio.
Okay.
It was a lovely location, but we really didn't have a presence in the theater. So that was one of our challenges.
So why don't we introduce Pat, and then we'll get back to all the exciting things that happened in the shops.
I started out about 20 years ago as a volunteer bartender. I worked concessions. Saturday afternoon I'd run from the shops to concessions, make the popcorn, and there were a lot of movies at that point. And just started working with Bob Warlock on Saturdays and just continued on through. And I've been managing now since last September.
So you must have overlapped at some point, or at least you were both volunteers at the same point. Because 20 and 25 had to overlap a little.
I left the floor, so to speak, probably after 15 years, 18 years, and moved upstairs to do the finances for the gift center.
So you were a hands-on volunteer selling merchandise for the first 15 years.
Yes. Yes, and that is negligible. I don't know if it was 18 or what, but there came a point when it was time to let it fly, and but I volunteered to stay on doing all the bookkeeping for the gift center.
What kind of money were you clearing in those days? Do you recall?
I certainly do. Well, we started off with a debt, which I mentioned, that $5,000 debt, and it took us a couple years to pay that off. And when we moved up to the present location, which was in '88, that first year we were able to contribute $30,000 to the theater.
Wow.
And it was always referred to as the dividend to the theater. And before I left, we had gotten that up to $100,000 a year, over $100,000 a year. So it was just so exciting to be a part of the growth, get new merchandise in. When we started, we didn't have any money for anything. So consignment was the only way to handle that, getting new merchandise in. That original $5,000 went towards all the Proctors logo items, which was a great place to start. Your t-shirts, your mugs, glassware, key rings, it was great. But after a while, once your patrons had their t-shirt and their mug, you know, where do we
What
go
next?
from here? And to tell you the truth, it got boring to me too. So our first little addition was very inexpensive clay masks and the trinket boxes. And so it added a little bit of theatrical to it. And then, as I said, the consignment was wonderful because you didn't have to pay for anything until the item sold.
So what kind of items would you
Well,
consign?
I contacted artisans. We had stained glass and Stephen Mark's wonderful painting of the theater. It was a print, actually, circa 1926, his vision of the grand gala opening of the theater. And that added a little class and something different, too. And jewelry. I wanted to keep with an arts theme, but we just couldn't go in every direction at once. And jewelry, we found, was very, very popular. A couple out for the evening come in, oh, I love that. There's a sale.
Yep, got 'em.
So we found a jeweler, too, that would put his jewelry in on consignment. And some of the, couple of the volunteers that were ushers were painters also. So we had some of their paintings in. And the consignment just took over from there. After a while, the consigners found us. Like your wonderful Proctors anniversary book, that was in the gift shop as consignment. We paid the theater when it sold. And as I mentioned, Stephen Mark's print, we framed some. And the posters, the theater posters,
Okay.
now they weren't on consignment, they were free.
Yes.
You like that part.
They became very, very popular. So any of these avenues where we didn't have to spend money to make money, it was really, really helpful. And then, of course, as time went on, gift shows became available to us. And that was fun. We could afford, once we could afford something like that, as you know, some of the suppliers' minimum orders,
They're
they were just
huge.
prohibitive at first.
Yes.
They really were. So there was growth there. It took a while, but
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Pat, in
By
recent
little.
times, how would you say your merchandise differed from?
We have a number of younger clientele who are looking for instance, they're looking for more of the Doctor Who or the Harry Potter, that type of performance stuff. And it's very hard now to get Broadway show merchandise. You used to be able to order the shirts and the whatnot, and when I first started, we had lots and lots of Broadway show shirts. Now the shows have their own merchandise, and it's very hard to find Broadway show wholesale merchandise to purchase and, to bring in the show.
So once the show is gone, no more shirts.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, even if we buy them from them, very, very, very seldom can we buy them for wholesale or at a discounted price, because they're going on to another venue, where they will sell more. And they have great merchandise, a lot of them. It's something we would love to carry. It's just not available to us right now.
Pat, what do any of the small shows have any merchandise that you can sell?
Not, for instance, Disenchanted is here. I haven't seen any merchandise from them at all. The smaller shows, a lot of times, if they bring anything, even like the rock and roll shows and so forth, they may bring CDs or that type of thing, and one of our volunteers or a volunteer usher or whatever will do the selling because they don't have someone. We used to do that in the early years, all the time, and now they just don't bring too much, or
Maybe
if
it's
they
too
do,
costly for them.
Yeah.
Now, there's an individual who has put his mark on the shops over the years, and that's Bob Warlock.
Absolutely.
So maybe you could talk about Bob's role, whether it's different in different
I'd be
times.
delighted to. There wouldn't be a gift center if it were not for Bob Warlock.
Absolutely.
He was a cheerleader for it right from the beginning. And, you know, always looking out for us. He was my liaison to theater management. And he came to the shop one day and he said, Flaws is going out of business over at the Mohawk Mall. Let's go see if we can find some display cases. We did.
Yep.
And then back to the comment on the shows coming into town. This was before contracts were so tight. Everything was a little looser back then. And you never knew if vendors were coming through with the show. Well, the theater would be emptied out at night. Everybody's gone home except for Bob, the vendor, and me at the time, gift center manager. Here he is, hashing over all their money, counting it up, wanting a cut for the theater. You're in our venue. We helped you sell, or we didn't. The percentage would depend on that.
Yep.
And this money would be out here. Okay, this is your cut. My husband came in waiting for me one night, and he goes, oh my God, I can't believe all that money that was flying around. I said, he does this all the time.
Yep,
Yeah, so anyway,
absolutely.
and that was a big boost because those monies went through the gift center.
Okay.
And the theater eventually got it, but it went through our books.
Our books.
And it
Encouraged you.
Yes, it certainly did. It gave us a boost for a month. And of course, there weren't as many shows back then either.
Right.
And our sales were directly correlated to the number of shows. And let's see, we were talking about Bob. Another time that was very significant, he came through the door of the gift center with this grimy, dusty plastic bag. I said, what have you got there? He said, what can you do with it? And I said, well, what is it? Well, it was the old Proctors curtain.
Oh, wow.
The old Proctors curtain. And I said, ooh. I said, well, let me think about that. So the first thing I did, I contacted chem cleaners, told them what it was, my idea of a project, and they dry cleaned it for free. So I was so appreciative of that. Well, anyway, the bottom line is I turned them into little burgundy Christmas stockings with lace on the top and a little satin ribbon, and we sold them. And I made over, by hand, 330.
Oh, my.
And I had sold about 20. It's a we. It wasn't a one-man show. We had sold about 20, and a board member came through. Paul Moore, as a matter of fact, and he goes, these should be numbered. And I said, oh, okay. Well, at that time, I knew who bought those first 20, so it was easy to backtrack. And then after that, actually, I have a little notebook that I found that I kept every single order in, and I disappointed quite a few people because I couldn't get them to them by the date they wanted. But filled all the orders, and I said, please don't accept any more.
So that was when they took down the old curtain and Carl
Yes.
Company sewed the new one.
Yes.
So there was surplus fabric. That's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Now, Pat, you also worked with Bob quite a bit.
I did, and part of that surplus material, the few years that we had the Christmas trees inside the main auditorium, 2 or 3 years, and we had a tree that the shop did. And the tree skirter on the bottom was actually part of the burgundy velvet material.
Oh,
It wasn't,
I didn't
it
know
was
that.
just kind of
Scrunched.
tucked,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Not sewn.
no, just
Glued,
kinda-
not sewn.
Yep.
Actually, the stocking, I think is on display in the Kay Rosendahl
Museum.
upstairs. Audrey donated hers. Audrey
Great.
Hughes. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, that's wonderful. So you were back squished in to
Wow.
the Louise Boyka studio former
Yes,
location.
yes.
She went upstairs, I think, didn't
Yes, she did.
And no big window to show anything
Well, we
particularly?
did. At the time, it opened to the parking lot in the side Stratton Boulevard back there. But the thing is, as people are entering the theater, they're looking at the marquee and the flashing lights, and then they hit the set of doors, and then, oh, there's another set of doors. They were focused on where they were going, and you weren't looking to your left, or your, depending what direction you're going. People just didn't see us. So I said, okay, we got to do something about this. So this is when we repurposed an old library cart and put a skirt around it to cover up the shelves. That's where the back stock was. I put an umbrella up for a little canopy over it and put some of our merchandise on it, and we wheeled that up into the theater, the volunteers did, for every performance, and we parked it right at the bottom of the balcony stairs. And it created some curiosity and an awareness of, wow, is there more? And so it gave us a presence that we were lacking.
And how long did that go on, the cart?
It went on for 4 years until we moved right across the hall. Then we didn't need it.
Okay,
And
so,
I think Mary Ann was so happy. It was in her way of ushering.
yes, well,
And it really wasn't,
no.
but you know, everybody's got their own little domain, and
they want to.
I don't think she was awfully crazy about that, but anyway, she was very accommodating.
So when did we move the shops into the present location, which is more in the middle of the arcade?
That was in '88.
Now, were you here in that time?
No, I didn't come until like 95, 96 in there.
Because one of those shops, the one that's, well, I don't know how to explain this, but if you're going toward the back, is on the right, is one of the skinniest stores I've ever seen
That
in my
was
life.
an old,
Yes.
a used
Apex.
record store,
Yeah.
and they went out of business, and we had the opportunity to move.
And across,
Once again, I'm sure that
Yeah.
was Bob's idea. Oh, the gift center can use that space. Then
And-
it was 5 years later that we got the Arcadia, the shop across. That was in the early 90s.
and that was a little more upscale in a certain way. I mean, it had.
Well, when we started, yes, it was different. It was kind of homey feeling items, soaps, lotions, picture frames, candles.
We used to sell in the beginning a lot
Jams.
of teapots and different
We had
cups.
Sadler
and that-
teapots.
Yes.
Yes, that type of item.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
were you involved? You weren't involved in any of the moves, so since you,
When I first started, we had the two shops that we have now, but there was also where the deli used to be. Before the black box construction, there was the holiday shop as well. And that was strictly, you know, it was holidays. It was Christmas and Easter and Halloween and whatnot. But then with the construction, we lost that one and gained the bookstore. And again, with the construction, they shut off Arcadia. When you came into Arcadia on the left-hand side, there was kind of a curtain because there were two steps there that took you into the back of the then concession stand. And so there's, you know, been a lot of little nooks and crannies. And they did widen the gift center during the construction. So we do have a little more space, but
yeah,
it's
I think they brought the
challenging.
windows out because we had quite
Yes.
a conversation with New York State Historic Preservation about whether we could do that.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
So
when
they're-
did that happen?
When was the construction?
5, 6,
Yeah.
because 04 we started our fundraising for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
I would have been upstairs by then. I missed that.
Yeah.
what was involved in moving? You had to redesign all those shops and figure out how to get fixtures and so
Well,
forth.
once again, Bob took care of all the fixtures, and actually, they were quite flexible because of the type of hardware he used. So you could change the depth and the
Right.
height of the shelves, and more bookcases and
Yes.
display cases. Yeah,
Now-
so at first, we didn't have enough merchandise to fill up the whole space. So from the entranceway towards Stratton Plaza was all, I would call it Proctors merchandise, and merchandise that we had, had accumulated
Right,
over the years,
right.
the
Right.
theater-oriented merchandise. And to the right of the doorway, up the 2 stairs, was an area that we called Encore. And it was where everything old was new again. Once again, it was all consignment.
Uh-huh.
Teapots, vases, fancy dishes, that kind of thing. And it got us through that period of time till we were able to get more performing arts related stock.
Very nice.
So anyway, it was fun, and it did the trick for the time being.
Pat, did you work on window displays in your, or who does the window displays?
I do.
And you've been doing that for quite a long time,
Since I started with the shops, yeah.
because they look very
They
nice.
look,
and
they
you.
look wonderful.
It's-
They really do.
You know,
Every
some-
once in a while, I decide I need something in there, and then I recall that I'm supposed to be downsizing.
Yeah. Well, some things are very small.
Yes, I know,
It's,
but they add up.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
to me, one of the most remarkable things about these shops is that except for maybe a manager being hired to operate it or do part of the work, it's all run by volunteers.
Totally.
And they sit there some days and, in an average day, they might have very few customers. They do really well when we have a show.
Shows, yeah.
But they're sitting there and they're usually in friend groups. And, they just come. They're extremely
Yeah.
loyal.
Oh, exceedingly.
are.
And they come and they're always happy, they're always up, they're happy to be there, they're...
And some work harder than others.
Yeah, sometimes, sometimes,
But
yeah.
they know who's supposed to go get the coffee or the
Yes,
lunch.
Yes.
Because I noticed one is getting the coffee for the other one, and then they
Yeah.
work it all out, whatever.
Yeah, it's very nice to be able to look across, to see who's in the shop or to ask a question and not have to explain it, not have to coerce them to, like today with the 4 cases of Christmas ornaments, and I marked what they needed to be, and I had 3 great ladies on this morning, and I plunked the boxes down, and they're done.
That's
and they
great.
do it smilingly and, without a buy or leave, and
And a lot of them have long tenure also
Yes.
with us.
yes. One of the ladies that works Wednesday mornings, when I first started in the shops, 99, someplace in there, she and her 2 sisters took me under their wing and, showed me the ins and outs and what I needed to do. And she is still there, and she still brings me pumpkin bread every single Wednesday morning.
Oh, you're so lucky.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and it's homemade. It's so good. But, they adopt people. There's never a friction, which is very nice.
So I noticed recently we have a different way of handling money down there. It's computerized. So you must have handled it the old cash register way.
We never had a cash register.
Oh,
In
would
the
you
whole
have
time
a,
I was
No.
there, everything was written out by hand on an old-fashioned
The
sales
pads,
pad with
yeah.
a carbon copy. And then at the end of the day, I would get these receipts, and I could tell what had sold because we coded everything. Every company had a code. Every item within that company had a number. And I'm sure
Yes,
you've gotten to this
still,
point
yep.
too, that you can just look at that code and know exactly what's
Exactly.
sold. And
Yep.
so that was very helpful to me during that period of time, but also when I got upstairs. I was no longer doing the ordering, but I could
But you
tell
still-
what was selling
Yeah.
just by these little slips of
Yep.
paper.
We had those.
And they're probably still in the archive someplace
We
in case
still
they
have
get
one of those
audited.
pads. I cleaned out a drawer the other day, and we still have one of those pads. And we were still doing that when I started in the shops. And then after the construction, we got our first register. And it's actually in the basement, but it had all these hundreds of squares, kind of like the McDonald's thing. we couldn't fill them in, but it was this huge register. And
Probably a donation.
maybe. And now we have the new square and the iPad, so. You know,
Oh,
our
wow.
IT people and Val and Finance keep us moving forward.
But that was quite a transition
Oh,
for your folks.
Definitely.
Because I used to stop in and they were
Oh,
a little frustrated with it in
Yes.
the
It's hard for
beginning.
the volunteers to pick up
Oh,
on,
it
wasn't
is.
it?
It
Even the
is.
original register.
Oh.
They'd be just intimidated by it.
I'd be really curious to know whether the original register is still in the basement.
Probably.
we don't-
Yes, didn't throw out
Yes,
too many
nope.
things around
Nope.
here.
Every once in a while, they have a sale of surplus items,
Oh,
and Dan Sheehan gets them all together and has a garage sale, so to speak. Well, is there
I
anything we
hope the
haven't?
historical committee gets first dibs.
I don't know.
no.
So is there anything else you'd like to chat about, or that we've missed? Any great stories about actors or anything who might have come in your shop?
Well, one of the highlights from my tenure there was not only all the great friendships I made and each year seeing the increments to the theater increase. That was thrilling to me. But when we opened up at the location where we are now, that was 1988, Red Skelton was performing. And he came in
Yeah.
and he was enamored with the shop, and particularly the Perot dolls
Yes.
and the mask. He was a clown collector himself. And so, I don't know, maybe Bob set this up, but there was a Gazette photographer there ready to snap this picture. And he said, "You should carry," and he called me Dear Heart, and I'll just never forget that, Dear Heart. He said, "You should carry my clowns." And I said, "How wonderful, we would love to. I'll send you our brochure." I said, "Oh, thank you so much." He did. He sent the brochure, and his clowns wholesaled for about $1,000
My.
a piece. And I said, "Well, we haven't come that far yet."
Wow.
Little too rich
Wow.
for your blood still.
Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, that was a thrilling evening. And of course, there were many, but that one
Yeah.
really stands out.
It's interesting because when Dennis was on this show, he talked a lot about Red Skelton. He had to take him to the mall.
Oh, really?
He has wonderful stories
Oh, wow.
about him, and he sounds like such a nice person.
He
You know,
was.
which is exciting
Just
to think a
he
big
called
star
me
like
Dear
that.
Heart, I'd call him Kind Heart. That's the way he impressed me.
You know, a lot of the performers, they, especially if they're here on days for 2 performances or they've been here for a couple of weeks, and they tend to come in and chat. And I've never yet met one that wasn't totally down to earth, was happy to just sit and talk, no matter what it was you were talking about, whether it was the show, whether it was the weather, where are they going, what have they done. You know, they're just a wonderful bunch of people. And I've, you know, if you saw them in the street, you'd have no idea, but it doesn't
Right.
change once they have the makeup and the stuff on. They're still the same wonderful people. And it doesn't matter if they're the older ones or the younger ones or the Christmas ones or the, you know, for Cabaret, the gentleman that played the MC was from London. And I still remember him coming in, and he had the, you know, the black makeup on and, you know, whatnot, and the polish and whatnot. And he was so down, it was like talking to my kids, you know, just was happy to have a place to sit and somebody to talk to that he didn't have to perform for. And they're all like that, they're wonderful. Very, very
Well,
kind.
that's a definite plus of these various jobs that
Yeah.
volunteers and others
Yeah.
have here. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate your being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank our audience as well on October 7th, 2016. This is another in the series of the Proctors Historical Committee effort to show the past and the present and a little bit of the future. And so we appreciate your watching.